On a cold morning in February 1502, as the clock struck 3, a scream echoing through the stone corridors of Castello Estense shook its walls. This was not the sound of fear or pain. It was an echo stranger, deeper, and more chilling to all. Guards lowered their gaze, while ambassadors and courtiers exchanged silent looks. Because everyone knew this sound was not the sign of ordinary passion, but the mark of the most dangerous and secret power ritual of Renaissance Europe. Before we step into the dark and forgotten corners of the past, are you ready to learn the secret and terrifying faces of history? By liking and subscribing to this narration, we can discover these cold secrets together. Sharing where you're listening from in the comments makes it possible for us to connect on this journey. As Ferrara slept under a blood-red moon, the events unfolding in the ducal chambers were a turning point that would shift Italy's political balance. Documents, kept secret for centuries, had almost completely erased that night from memory. However, the truth that emerged when the documents surfaced was this. A 22-year-old woman had transformed her own body into history's most powerful diplomatic weapon. Imagine a throne room, a room where every breath, every moan, was valued like currency, where a woman's flesh became a battleground. Here, marriage was not a matter of romance, but part of a ceremonial war that either toppled dynasties or cemented empires. What is about to be revealed is not just the backstage of a scandalous wedding night. It is the exposure of a secret protocol interweaving sexuality and politics, hidden for centuries in European archives. This story tells how Lucrezia Borgia, the daughter of a murder-shadowed pope, twice widowed, transformed from prey to predator. Her single night of closely monitored intimacy became the foundation stone of a dynasty. Whispers spread the name of this woman, at times feared, at times desired, who determined the fate of Italy. The year 1502 marked the pinnacle of the Borgia family's power. Rodrigo Borgia, known as Pope Alexander VI, had turned his children not into pawns, but into figures who checkmated his rivals on the chessboard. In Italy's fragmented map, every marriage was a treaty, every wedding bed a front line. For Ercole d'Este, the Duke of Ferrara, this marriage was not merely a ceremony, but the hope for his dynasty's survival. His son, Alfonso d'Este, became the key to this political gamble. The agreement signed on December 30th, 1501, clearly revealed how calculated the marriage was. Lucrezia's dowry was 100,000 gold ducats, but the real price would be paid that night, measured not in gold, but in flesh. Because in that era, the validity of aristocratic marriages was confirmed only by the consummation, the consummation witnessed by observers. The first night was not private, it was a semi-public stage. And failure here meant not just shame, but the collapse of an entire dynasty. The chosen date, February 2nd, was certainly no accident. Today was the feast of the purification of the Virgin, sanctified in the Catholic world. By aligning the wedding bed with this holy day, the Borgias and the Estes aimed to unite not only two bodies, but also heaven and earth. Thus, the union became not a mere sexual act, but a sacred rite of the dynasties. When Lucrezia entered Ferrara, she carried the weight of two disastrous marriages on her shoulders. She was only 22. The poet Pietro Bembo described her beauty as rare and luminous. Yet this brilliance was overshadowed by her blood-stained reputation. Her first husband, Giovanni Sforza, had fled in shame after accusations of impotence. Her second husband, Alfonso of Aragon, had been strangled within the walls of the Vatican, a victim of papal schemes. Lucrezia was no longer a pure bride, but a survivor, armed with intelligence, seductiveness, and one of the most dangerous qualities, the ability to turn weakness into power. Her new husband was her complete opposite. Alfonso d'Este, 25, was a soldier, an engineer, a warrior who cast cannons with his own hands. Unlike the effete and pale nobles of the Italian courts, Alfonso did not strive to show his power. His very presence exuded might. He played music elegantly, designed cannons meticulously, carrying the strength of a warrior and the refinement of a Renaissance prince in a single body. On one side, Lucrezia, armed with seduction. On the other, Alfonso, with raw power. The clash of these two characters set the stage for one of the most explosive unions of the age. The accidental meeting in Benvolio on January 3rd changed everything. In that private encounter, Lucrezia and Alfonso discovered a genuine attraction no one had planned. It was a spark that transcended cold political calculation. Thus, what was expected to be a ritualized performance was now fueled by authentic passion. Therefore, neither the church nor the state could fully dominate the approaching night. On February 1st, Ferrara turned into a stage. The magnificent procession that carried Lucrezia into the city was merely a prelude to the real play that would unfold behind closed doors. As the crowd cheered, Lucrezia, clad in a French-style dress, her necklace adorned with diamonds and rubies, sparkled in the winter light. But behind the citizens' applause, a different preparation was underway in the dark corridors of the palace. Spies and scribes had taken their places to record the smallest detail. Among them was Duchess Isabella d'Este's own chancellor. As a rival, she was determined to extract political information even from the most intimate night. This was no accident. This was a deliberate act of espionage, a search for evidence to be used in Italy's ruthless game of power. The chosen date was also not a coincidence. February 2nd, the Feast of the Purification of the Virgin, brought the sacred and the sexual to the same point. The clash of the divine and the worldly. Every detail, every gesture was choreographed to turn this union from a mere wedding night into a dynastic rite. Here was not just two people uniting, but two great dynasties. Inside the ducal chambers, the scene was set. Crimson velvet curtains framed the bed like theatrical scenery. Silver candelabras cast flickering lights over Flemish tapestries, depicting battles and alliances. Every detail in the room was a reminder that this night was about politics as much as love. This place had become both a sanctuary and a stage. The most crucial political performance of the century was about to begin. When Alfonso entered, both were aware of their roles. They had found a real spark during their meeting in Benvolio. But now that spark had to be proven, demonstrated, and recorded. What was about to happen was no longer a private act. It was a ritual based on the centuries-old traditions of European aristocracy. In noble marriages, consummatio was not merely intimacy, but a document of legitimacy. It proved that an heir could be born, that alliances would be strengthened, and that the dynasties would endure. In Renaissance Italy, this proof had to be supported by silent but present witnesses. The royal bed was transforming into a courtroom, the act of love, into a verdict determining the future of nations. Lucrezia had not forgotten the lessons of her previous two catastrophic marriages. Giovanni Sforza's impotence had brought shame and annulment. Alfonso of Aragon's strangulation in the Vatican had taught her that weakness in the marriage bed meant death in politics. She would no longer be a pawn. By transforming her body into a weapon, she aimed not for survival, but for dominance. Alfonso was also aware of the risks. His masculinity was known, but rumor was not enough. It had to be proven, recorded, and documented by witnesses. The Este dynasty could not afford rumors of impotence or infertility. For legitimacy, the ritual could not be satisfied with a single union. Every act was to be recorded, serving as a shield against annulments, scandals, or assassinations. The night began this way. The first union carried an intensity neither of them expected. Genuine passion merged with political necessity, surprising even them. For the first time, duty and desire found common ground. This marriage was not merely staged, it was genuinely lived. The second union was recorded by Isabella d'Este, secretly placed chancellor. This revealed how every moment was under surveillance. To an outsider, this might look like an invasion, but in the eyes of the court, it was simply duty. The bedroom had become an extension of the treaty room, every breath and every cry turning into a political testimony. The third and final act determined the fate of the ritual. This was no longer just the union of two bodies. It was the birth of a living, breathing alliance between the Borgia and Este families. The official records kept that night provided both legal and political legitimacy to both dynasties. Alfonso's endurance and composure proved not only his virility, but also his internal resilience and strategic intellect. Demonstrating presence under such pressure was equivalent to the discipline he showed as a military leader. Lucrezia, meanwhile, exhibited the sharp instincts that allowed her to survive despite betrayal and a bloody past. Together, they managed to conclude a deadly trial with triumph. This night was observed, documented, and sanctified by witnesses. It was now about politics and power, not just love. Lucrezia's ability to turn weakness into strength, to transform her own body into a political shield, set a precedent that would echo throughout the Renaissance. The detailed notes kept by the official scribe were more than gossip. They were binding documents, proof of dynastic legitimacy that could protect the Este Borgia alliance for many years. These records provided a guarantee against the annulment of the marriage, secret conspiracies, or military or diplomatic pretexts by rival powers. The night of February 2nd, 1502, created a new standard. The documentation of multiple unions became the measure of validity for political marriages of the highest importance, no longer an exception. The royal bed was no longer just a private space. It was a courtroom, a stage, and a battleground. Sexual performance had become an element of power that determined the fate of empires. With the sun rising on the morning of February 3rd, Lucrezia and Alfonso ceased to be ordinary bride and groom, becoming the architects of a new political reality. Their successful fulfillment of the dynastic ritual gave the alliance such a solid foundation that its influence spread across Italy for decades. The world now saw that when sexuality was used strategically, it could be a ruler's sharpest weapon. The echoes spreading beyond the walls of Ferrara indicated that the ritual, initially intimate, had become a political earthquake. Rivals who wished for the collapse of the marriage were now helpless against the documented proof. They could no longer dismiss Lucrezia as a tainted bride or Alfonso as merely a soldier. The records prove that this union was both legitimate and unbreakable. Lucrezia's position in the court quickly changed. She was no longer just a tolerated outsider, but an indispensable source of power. Her survival became synonymous with the stability of the dynasty. Her death meant chaos. Her presence was assurance. Alfonso was also strengthened. His performance proved not only his virility, but also his resilience under pressure. Where other noble heirs were shaken by whispers of annulments or inadequacy, Alfonso emerged victorious. His rightful heirship in Ferrara was now an undeniable fact. However, not every eye rejoiced at this success. Isabella d'Este, the undisputed star of court life, now found a dangerous rival across from her. Lucrezia's success had turned her from a target into a powerful player. The rivalry between the two women had been tense since their first encounter at Malibero. It now escalated into a silent but deadly war. Ferrara became the stage for the psychological battles that would shape the court for years. Subtle gestures, whispered rumors, and silent power contests. This alliance also altered the geopolitics of Italy. France, Spain, and rival duchies were forced to accept the Este Borgia bond as a single power bloc. Diplomatic calculations were revised. Treaties, trade routes, and military strategies were reshaped around the reality of this united power. But politics was not the only battlefield. On September 5, 1502, Lucrezia gave birth to a stillborn girl during labor. Rumors immediately spread. Was the child conceived on the wedding night, or during secret meetings in Ferrara? Chroniclers obsessed over the timeline, as paternity was not only personal, but also proof of political legitimacy. Lucrezia neared death with puerperal fever. She survived a trial that many women did not. Her recovery was viewed by her contemporaries as divine grace and proof of her power. But this experience changed her. Facing death during childbirth showed her that survival depended not only on beauty or obedience, but also on sharp strategy. This realization guided her down a more dangerous path. About a year later, she entered into a relationship with Francesco Gonzaga, the Marquis of Mantua. This relationship was not only about passion, but a calculated move. By choosing her rival's husband, Lucrezia struck a blow to Isabella's pride while securing a new line of political safety for herself. This affair was conducted under a veil of secrecy, but its effect was like an earthquake. Letters between Lucrezia and Francesco, discovered centuries later, reveal emotional intimacy and political shrewdness simultaneously. Lucrezia was not just using him for her own ends. She found a genuine connection in Francesco, but this connection also served as a safety net against her rivals. Her ability to maintain her marriage with Alfonso while conducting this affair demonstrated her mastery of sexual diplomacy. She was no longer merely a survivor, but a planner who built her strategy upon a network of intimacy and loyalty. For Isabella, this scandal was devastating. Losing influence at court was one thing, but losing her husband's attention to Lucrezia was both a personal and political blow. Following this confrontation, a silent power struggle began in the Ferrara court that would last for years. For Isabella d'Este, her husband falling into the arms of her fiercest rival was not only a humiliation, but also a political catastrophe. Court gossip became daggers. While she knew how to wield influence through desire, Lucrezia not only sought revenge, she rewrote the rules of the game, demonstrating that intimacy could be a weapon as effective as armies. Lucrezia's years-long relationship with Francesco Gonzaga established a new model of Renaissance sexual diplomacy. These were not fleeting romantic adventures. They were the tactical extensions of politics. Aristocratic affairs functioned as a safety net, forming a buffer against betrayal and exile. Other noble families soon developed similar strategies, attempting to protect themselves by turning their own lovers and confidants into a network. Meanwhile, Lucrezia's legitimate children with Alfonso made her position at court indisputable. Every child born proved the successful culmination of the legitimization protocol performed on the wedding night. She was no longer just tolerated, but indispensable. The survival of the Este dynasty depended directly on her body, resilience, and ability to ensure continuity. Lucrezia's transformation was extraordinary. Once a bride trapped within the ruthless machinery of dynastic marriage, she had become the architect of her own destiny. She turned the vulnerabilities of womanhood into strengths, merging strategy with survival. While others broke under pressure, she managed to masterfully control it. The wedding night of February 2nd and the archives it left behind stand as one of the most detailed documents on how Renaissance marriage diplomacy operated. Stripped of the fairy tale dresses and poetic vows, what remained was naked calculation and a power game. Marriages were established not for love, but for power. Unions were staged and documented. Official protocols were implemented to prevent annulment. Sexual protocols were designed to make alliances undisputable. Thus, the template initiated by the Borgias and the Estes spread. Documented unions became the formula for unshakable alliances. Even after their deaths, heirs inherited not only land, but also a strategic methodology. A cold, calculated system. The bedroom became as important in politics as the battlefield. Lucrezia's transformation from a bride to a power broker stands as one of the most striking examples in European history. She demonstrated how a woman could seize her own will in a world that sought to suppress her. She proved that with intelligence, courage, and strategic intimacy, she could bend the rules of a system believed to be immutable. However, this story is only one piece of the secret mosaic hidden in European archives. European archives contain countless secrets and protocols deemed too scandalous for official records. Queens, duchesses, and couriers had used sexuality as a decisive weapon as much as diplomacy or warfare. Did you know that Catherine de' Medici perfected a system of seduction to control 3 French kings? That and Bullen's mastery of erotic politics shattered England's Catholic unity and led to the birth of a new religion? That Isabella of Castile secured the unity of Spain with a union so closely observed on her wedding night that it required the testimony of 5 official scribes? These women were not passive players. They were figures who operated with deadly strategies, rewriting the rules in the confined spaces available to them. If this glimpse into Lucrezia's world has impressed you, and you've seen that history's most forbidden truths are far more interesting than the sanitized myths, you have only scratched the surface.